Everybody, we're going to be moving right along as we discuss really what's considered to be kind of an overlooked war in American history, but we're going to be kind of looking at some of the themes that lead to what happens in 1812, which is basically another war with Britain. A lot of people call it the Second War for Independence because of what the lasting result is in our country for how we feel as a nation compared to other major countries in the world, especially like Britain and France. I'm not going to get too much into this today. We're going to kind of piece it out, but we're going to look at some of the circumstances with what happens after the presidencies of Thomas Jefferson. So if you're watching this, yesterday in class, we talked about reviewing Washington, Adams, and Jefferson. This is going to be moving on from that slightly, but we're not going to get too much into it because I don't want to overload you here with information. But let's go ahead and get started. Maybe. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to look at 1808 as an election. So this is going to be the first term after Thomas Jefferson because he steps down after 2 terms. Now, he's following the precedent. Again, this word precedent means example to follow that Washington set when he was president. He left after 2 terms. Jefferson did the same. Adams was not reelected. He lost his reelection chance, but Jefferson steps down for 2 terms, but obviously a lot of why Jefferson stepped down is because he couldn't wait to leave the presidency. It was not something he enjoyed. So his Secretary of State, James Madison, who is the guy that wrote the Constitution in the Bill of Rights, is going to run for president in 1808. He's going to win. So we're going to see a continuation or ongoing power for the Democratic Republican Party. So this is now the second presidential election in a row that they've won, and Madison is elected the 4th president of the United States. Okay. Now, it is important to note that James Madison is going to inherit the same troubles as Thomas Jefferson, and that's the war between Britain and France. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the issues that Jefferson faces that Madison will continue to face that ultimately leads to war. I mean, it's no secret the way I started the presentation, Madison is going to be the guy that eventually gets us into war because we've kind of been in this position of neutrality, not getting involved. And that's going to change with Madison. And it's really not something that he can control. It's because of influences from people who he works with, people in his own political party, and actions taken by the British. But I want to pause here and I want to focus on this, the circumstance here with this election map. And you see here, maybe, I guess my pen's not working. There we go. Let's see if this works. No, pen's not working, but we'll make do. What we have with this division here, and we see this area I'm circling here, there's the Federalist Party, Charles Pinckney in the orange, the Federalist candidate, winning a good majority of votes here in the New England region. This is because, you know, this is the region that was heavily impacted by the trade embargo. Remember, this was an embargo that Thomas Jefferson issued that basically said that we're not going to trade with anybody. Well, if you're a region like New England, and the reason why we focus on New England is it's basically the states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire. And it's important to note that this territory up here, which we now know as the state of Maine, is a part of Massachusetts, which is why the arrow's connected. That region of New England is impacted more than anybody if we have a trade embargo. So that's the reason they didn't support the Democratic Republican candidate, James Madison, because of the trade embargo. But it didn't matter because Madison and his party are overwhelmingly liked and supported, and he's going to win. It is important to note that we have George Clinton as another candidate in the lighter green here. He won 6 electoral votes in his home state of New York. It's kind of surprising to see a candidate win that many electoral votes, another candidate. He had kind of run for president, even though he did not have the full support of his party. Madison was the candidate. George Clinton had been the vice president to Thomas Jefferson. So the other thing to notice is that the country's kind of expanding. We're going to see Indiana become state in 1816, and we're going to see by the time we get to 1820, several other states, including Alabama, Mississippi, Illinois. Louisiana is going to become a state very soon, so that's something to watch as well. Last thing I want to talk about really quick is just kind of like the beginning tension that leads to the problems that we're going to see with this war. And again, I'm not going to get too far into it because it is something that we're going to talk a lot about on Wednesday when you're back in person. But Jefferson's embargo devastated American trade. Now, the good thing is that it was later repealed. Repealed means you basically get rid of it because people realized in the country that they can't have a trade embargo. The whole point of this embargo was to basically try to show Britain and France that they can't treat American ships at sea that are trying to trade the way they were treating them. Remember, Britain and France would stop goods and steal them. And America's like, you can't do that to us. So that was the whole point of the embargo. And it was basically to try to make a point to Britain and France to finally say, okay, we'll leave you alone. But that didn't really work. So it kind of backfired. But what ends up happening is basically another law, which is called Makin's Bill No. 2, is issued. And basically it says they're going to trade with everybody, but they're going to basically give an ultimatum to Britain and France. And an ultimatum basically means you have one opportunity to get this right. And if you do, great, we'll be back on good terms. But if you don't, then we won't trade with you. So basically, Britain and France had an opportunity, and whichever country first agreed to leave American ships alone and stop bothering us at sea, if they agreed to that, we would trade with them. Well, France agreed to that, but that means that we will trade with France once again, but we will continue to have an embargo with Britain. Well, I think you probably see where this is going to go, because if we're trading with France and we're not trading with Britain, when these two countries are at war, we obviously can probably predict that something's going to happen with Britain. So not only does Britain continue to stop American shipping, but they also begin something that has been ongoing on and off for many years, but really ramps up, which is called impressment. And this is one of those vocabulary terms that we have seen already, which basically means if you were an American sailor and you were on board a ship that had goods that were going to Europe to be sold, you were being kidnapped and forced to serve in the British Navy. Now, this would be absolutely crazy if this happened today. This would be a huge major news story, and this very well could be something that could lead to war today. But what Britain said, and this was their reasoning for why they did it, was, well, the people on board these American ships are actually British naval soldiers, sailors, that just deserted the Navy, and we're just kidnapping them back. Well, that was never proven, because the number of American sailors who were impressed, as the term is called, were in the thousands and thousands. So that is something that is going to make Americans very upset, because again, to a lot of people, this entire war that will happen, and we're not getting to the other reasons yet, but then this entire war and conflict is really due to the fact that American pride and integrity was on the line. A lot of people will be referring to the phrasing of defending her honor, her being America and America's honor. And that's going to have a big part of this, okay? All right, there's going to be just a couple of questions that I want you to review for the exit ticket today, but don't forget, when you come back tomorrow, we are going to be quizzing over Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, and also talking about this information. Thank you. See you Wednesday.